Hi, my name is John Petty, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Growing Up in Flip Flops. This episode is entitled Sunny Side. In the town that I grew up, there was a daily newspaper, and in it, there was a weekly column that was called Sunny Side. The byline on the column was by the unlikely named Sunshine Bobo. I'd always grown up thinking that that was some sort of a pseudonym or a nickname until I realized while reading Mrs. Bobo's obituary a few years back that her given name was Sunshine, and she went by the nickname of Sunny and married Mr. Bobo, and hence the name Sunshine Bobo. But this episode isn't about a name. Rather, it's about the column that Sunshine Bobo wrote, Sunny's Sides. When we received our paper, I went out and picked up the paper on the front steps and brought it into my mother for breakfast. And if she read it during breakfast, the first thing that she turned to was, at whatever day of the week it appeared, was the Sunshine Bobo column, Sunny's Sides. What the column consisted of was, to me, always so strange, but it was very, very interesting to my mother. And I'm making this up, but this is very, very typical of it, that Miss Miss Evelyn Penworthy of Fort Wayne, Indiana, is visiting her maternal aunt and uncle, Mr. and Mrs. Sam Jones of, and then an address in our hometown, for the next 2 weeks. Miss Penworthy is a sophomore at Indiana University studying fashion design. Following the visit to Fort Myers, Mr. and Mrs. Jones will accompany Miss Penworthy back to her home in Fort Wayne and planning on stops at Mammoth Cave in Kentucky and the War Memorial in Indianapolis. Period. It was an entire column made up of little snippets, just like the entirely fictitious one that I just made up and recited. It was strange, even to my young mind, and even more as I got into high school, that here were people saying that A, who was visiting their house, that people would be interested that Miss Evelyn Penworthy of Fort Wayne, Indiana was somehow in town. And even more so, the bigger surprise to me was that Mr. and Mrs. Jones were announcing that they were going to be gone from their house for the next 2 weeks, with an address listed in the newspaper where they resided. To me, this was, I always thought this was an open invitation to criminals, but obviously it simply didn't stop folks from clearly submitting these little snippets to Sunshine Bobo to print in her column. Now, in all fairness to Mrs. Bobo, she did do other columns, general human interest, but this thing of Sunny Side was just a listing of all these things from around town that, and it might not be that somebody was visiting them, it was, that they were going to go visit somebody and of their street address that they were going to be gone. Whenever I thought back to sort of the innocence of my upbringing and thinking of things, I would think about this column of Sunshine Bobos and how people listed this thing. And it was just so amazing to me, the innocence and naivete, if you would, of doing this. And I thought that that was a bygone time. Well, let's fast forward to today. How many times have I seen on people's Facebook pages doing the exact same thing that was in Mrs. Bobo's column of telling people, oh, I'm leaving on a trip to Nova Scotia for the next month, and I've got I've left my cat with my neighbor or something, and I'm gone for the next month. Times haven't changed. The only thing that has changed is the medium. And that's something that is immensely interesting to me. Human nature doesn't change, it's just simply how we view it and how people express themselves that change. The underlying human nature of people wanting to share, of being interested in what other people are doing, it hasn't changed. It's just simply how we communicate that. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next week. Bye.